Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation about our dialogue tool. Me, Nadir, Krisa, Mohammed, and Quinty picked gene editing as our controversial topic to have a dialogue on. Firstly, I'll describe what the topic is and its controversy and different views on it. Then Mohammed will explain what our tool is and why we used it. Krisa will talk about dialogue features supported by theories from the course. And Quinty will revise the feedback session we had last week and what we have learned from the feedback and what we can improve. So, gene editing. Gene editing is a group of technologies that scientists use to change an organism's DNA, and such technology adds, removes, or alters locations in the genome. And consequently, scientists aim in using gene editing to improve humans by treating diseases with a genomic basis, like cystic fibrosis and diabetes, or enhancing an individual in a particular manner. But here comes a dilemma. Is gene editing a good or bad technology? Our main question, how can we, the science communicators, contribute and shape such a controversy? So, why is it a controversy? On the white iPad, you can see that it states the science of today is the technology of tomorrow. Gene editing is a vital step into the future. For example, it is necessary to treat and eliminate deadly diseases. And another view on the black iPad, it states we are no god and we should not act like one. Gene editing can cause many problems and we should not risk it. Gene editing has its consequences as every other procedure, and a lot of people are afraid that there will be too much errors made or scientists will misuse it. So we made a mind map with reviews on this controversy. Firstly, we have Natalie, a 24-year-old nurse who thinks that gene editing is a great opportunity to save our children and future generations from diseases. Then there's Paul, a 27-year-old engineer, and he's not a big fan of gene editing as he's afraid of how much the genes are going to be edited. Where do scientists draw the line? At only treating heritable diseases or at changing certain physical traits such as high hair color or body type? And then there's Georgia, a 22-year-old student, and she sees the positive and negative sides of gene editing. Um, However, gene editing is still in its baby shoes, so she needs more scientific information on the matter to make up her mind. So we targeted young educated adults in their early mid 20s with basic knowledge on biological concepts, and we targeted them because they are probably the first generation using this gene editing on their offspring. They are directly influenced of it on the long term, so their opinion matters. We tried to describe the use of gene editing in simple terms and listen to their opinion with active participation in dialogue.
Okay, the goal uh, of our tools are firstly to have an engaging and fruitful dialogue, exchange of experience and thoughts, the production of more ideas, and allow participants to dive deeper. For our first tool, we use the Kahoot for the use of a poll. We use this uh, we use this tool to give the participants the option to express their opinion and preferences over gene editing, and to have an interactive method for representatives, yet quick interplay between the stakeholders and audience. It's also a visual approach to intrigue the audience and make them think, and have a final discussion time to witness how the opinion of the audiences have changed. For our main tool, we use the podcast. Our podcast is used inside science. The users of a podcast that discuss scientific topics with people who are interested in science. Scientists, as a co host, explaining topics in a simple way, giving examples applied in everyday life, and provide personal advice, and special guests. And we had special guests, two young adults sharing their experiences and somewhat conflicting opinions on gene editing. The main aim of the podcast is to present the controversy about gene editing in an intriguing way and make the audience think and shape their opinion in a semi direct manner. We use this tool for our target group because it's a fun way to transmit information to young adults. So, this is our podcast on Spotify. Looks very nice as you can see. And this is the format. So, first we had an introduction, a basic insight of gene editing and how it works. Then an interactive Kahoot in which we gave two conflicting statements and asked if the participants agree or disagree. And then our main tool, the podcast, in where we talk more about gene editing. Then we have the discussion to see if the participants have changed their opinion.
Now we will talk about the dialogue models and tools in regards to the course material. First, we would like by introducing our model, which is nothing else but the transaction model, in which it is stated that scientists are not the only ones making judgments, and that society should be also able to express itself by choices that are made in the scientific process. Such choices will affect both the science and the society in the future, and therefore the scientists and the public should engage as a whole in dialogue with one another to arrive at new insights, alternative points of view, and solutions. But what it has to be memorized is the fact that all sides must be open to one another. Next, we have the main trend of the science communication professionals, which is nothing else but the fact that public participation in which interaction between social parties and experienced experts is rather central. Then, for our motive, we use the normative argument, which states that citizens have the democratic right to state their view on matters that concern them. This is why it is really crucial to use dialogue in decision making to have multiple point of views of different people. The reason why this motive is very related to our target group is because young adults have the right to state their views on gene editing because it's a matter that concerns them and that can affect their future in a very active way. Next, we will be discussing the conversation tools throughout our conversation. We use the imago dialogue, which represents that all parties agreed to one person talks at a time. One person sends the information and the others receive it. Secondly, we will be referring to the active listening, which states that participants listen to the speaker from their own perspective without filtering the information based on their beliefs. Then we have the exploratory questioning. Basically, it talks about the fact that questions are asked throughout the podcast by the participants in order to help them understand more about the topic without attributing bias or notions. And lastly, we use the empathy tool. As the name implies, it talks about the fact that the participants recognize the emotions in the other speakers and understand other perspectives on the gene editing situation. Now we will dive into the dialogue features applied in the podcast regarding the course material. First, we use the narration tool, which refers to the fact that in order to trigger the people and raise questions, you have to use a triggering event. This is why we started the conversation with the triggering event of the CRISPR baby scandal, which talks about the Chinese scientists who edit the genomes of the babies for the first time and ended up going to Germany for illegal medical practice. Then we will refer to the imagination tool. As the name implies, it refers to the fact that in order to help the participants understand the unknown, we should introduce new creative ideas. For that reason, we introduce two metaphors. First, the first metaphor talks about the gene editing, and it expresses that you can turn a small dog into a big dog. And the second one refers to the technique itself. So it talks about the Pac-Man game and how gene editing pumps into the bad viral DNA and cuts it out, just like a Pac-Man game. Then we have the action reflection tool that talks about the fact that a theatrical debate is essential in order to make a statement and help the participants understand the problematic situations. First, we refer to the normative diversity concept, which introduces the fact that each person has different opinions on the same matter, depending on their background. So first, we have the hemophilic boyfriend that wants to eliminate the chances of its baby being ill. And secondly, we have the father that doesn't really care only about the health of its baby, but also wants to modify its appearance, but gene editing. And then we have the factual uncertainty example, which refers to the fact that gene editing is an emerging technology, and therefore we are unsure of how scientists might end up making a mistake and thereby causing an even bigger disease to the individual than the initial one. Lastly, at the end of the podcast, we use the co-creation tool, which refers to the fact that you have to make a concrete plan and so that opinions of the participants matter. So we use the triggering concept that refers to the fact that we try to show that we care about the audience opinion, and we therefore invite them to contact us on our Twitter page or on any other profile of social media, because we want to hear their opinion and we want them to interact actively with us. Lastly, about the course material, we also want to make a statement about the facilitators and the personas. First, Nadir, as already explained, was the podcast host, and he was acting as the neutral facilitator and a passive chairman. So he basically monitored the discussion and the dialogue without making any further comments about the concept itself and without giving any input in the discussion. Then Krisa was the co-host and the expert that was gonna give more insight into gene editing. She acted as an active chairman, so she tried to give explanations and information about gene editing, as well as to summarize the discussion. But at the same time, she also acted as a devil's advocate because she tried to increase interaction by presenting conflicting viewpoints. Last but not least, we had Quindi and Mohammed. They were both special guests and they were representing the public. This is why they both had different opinions on the matter, yet at the same time, it made the public identify with them, since also the public had different opinions on gene editing that were very similar with the ones from Quindi and Mohammed.
And then for the feedback. After presenting our dialogue tool, we received some feedback from other groups who were watching our presentation. In this feedback, we got some positive and some negative points as well. The positive point stated that it was easy to understand. You could listen to the podcast while cooking dinner or doing the dishes. It was also entertaining and engaging. The metaphors and jokes made the topic more doable and interesting for younger people. The different personas and points of view made it more interesting to listen to. Also during the discussion time, there was a reference to the podcast and the dialogue tools, and thereby making a clear relation. The negative point stated that the poll option was anonymous and did not give the audience the opportunity to provide reasoning for their given answers. Also, the host was not leading the conversation, but rather the expert. Hence, the facilitator distribution was unbalanced. And last, the opinion of the expert seemed biased, and thereby making the conversation more like a debate and less of a dialogue. We looked at those negative points and looked for improvements. So instead of having the poll option anonymous and not giving the audience the opportunity to provide reasoning for their given answers, we thought of creating a non-anonymous poll with open answers. So for the participants to give explanation for their point of view. The second one, the host was not leading the conversation, but rather the expert. We thought to make the host the main facilitator by leading the conversation and building the foundations of the controversy. And for the last point, the opinion of the expert seemed biased, and thereby making the conversation more like a debate. We thought of creating a bias-free dialogue by making the expert express statements rather than her personal opinion. And in that way, the audience will not feel obligated to choose the expert side. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening.